Your chess will change forever after this video because I'm gonna show you the simplest opening, the only one you need for black to reach 2000 elo and even beyond. So it starts with the move d6. I love it so much. I played for 10 years now with successful results. Why? Because first, it's so flexible. You don't care whether they play e4, d4, c4. In this case, my opponent played here d4 and c4. I just played the move e5, first d6 and then e5. I want to fight for the center. I want to be active, but it's so flexible. You don't basically need to know any theory whatsoever. And there is a very good chance you are going to enter the endgame pretty early on in the game. And this is huge because this endgame is arguably absolutely not worse for black at all. And because you are going to have more experience, because you're going to understand the ideas much better than your opponent, you're going to have tremendous advantage in this endgame. So you don't have any weaknesses. The first major thing, like everybody I showed this endgame are saying that, well, but you cannot castle. How are you gonna play? Your king is in the middle of the board and it cannot castle. How horrible is that? Well, the truth is, it's not horrible at all. It's absolutely fantastic. Your king should be in the center once you reach the endgame. And basically, you reach the endgame once there are no queens on the board. So with the queens on the board, you want to castle exactly for a reason, because it's unsafe for the king to be in the center. Because your opponent is just gonna attack you with all of his pieces and you're going to be destroyed. But without the queens, it's a completely different game. You just don't need to be afraid of having your king in the center. Somewhere like c7 would be a beautiful square for the king. You have nothing to worry about because of this pawn c6. Please, if you do take one thing out of this video, remember to always put your pawn into the c6 square in the filator defense or old Indian defense. If it's d4, what white is playing, please always place your pawn on c6 because it's beautiful against this knight on c3. The knight has no moves, like literally zero ideas it can do because of this pawn on c6, and exactly for the same reason this king would be more than secure on the c7 square. Otherwise this knight would jump with the check and again we would need to find a better square. But as is, the king will have zero problems on c7. And you see that white is already struggling. Like, my opponent, it's Valeria, she doesn't know what to do here. She's very advanced, 2300 rated, but no idea what to do as white. Why? Because this bishop, this knight, sorry, is useless. This knight is also useless because of this pawn on f6 has zero job to do. And this bishop, yeah, also because of those light square pawns, well, the bishop has no job to do. Yes, she can castle here alone, and seems like the rook is very active, but I just remove my king and there is absolutely no danger for me whatsoever. What I can also do is play the move bishop c5. Since now there is no pin yet, I can play bishop c5, my knight is protecting that, and I attack that bishop. I threaten just to take it and destroy her pawn structure. But if she takes me, then I'm gonna just take it back with the knight, and the knight is a beautiful piece on c5 in this whole setup because it puts pressure on the e4 pawn and it stands absolutely fantastic. Maybe I should have played a5, however, now that I think about it, because you always want to keep an eye on this b4 square, otherwise this b4 pawn is coming and that's a little bit annoying. Well, you never my philosophy here is you don't need to play perfect chess. This opening is perfect even if you don't make all the best moves. It's still very flexible, you still have very good chances, and yes, like playing here instead of bishop c5, a5 first, and the next move nobody would stop me from playing bishop c5 would be a little bit better. Now white has this b4 opportunity, which is not the end of the world, but just a little bit annoying. And yeah, I can step back. Okay, she's doing that. That's the right thing to do. I'm gonna step back and I'm gonna immediately try to put pressure on that pawn later on. Yeah, now that she has castled and her rooks are connected, she can support it with h3. I still can do it because b5 is never a problem. I'm gonna place my knight on c5 and b5, yeah. B takes A, I'm gonna just take it back with the rook. Again, the c5 square would be available. So the only reasonable move is that, but then of course I don't take. That would create some problems for me along the A file. Instead, I'm gonna play knight d7, I'm gonna play king c7. Finally, I talk about that move so long. It's time to make it. And then my rooks will be connected, and I'm going to be ready for the move A takes B. You always want to develop all of your pieces. That's absolutely essential in chess. Once you do understand that, once you don't make two moves with the same piece ever again, unless there is a very, very good reason to do that, your chess will immediately improve so much. I made a mistake here because of this knight c5 and forgetting about the b4 resource for white. I needed to waste two additional tempi, which wasn't necessary at all. And that is why I'm not ahead here in the development. I still have a very solid position, zero problems, but I am not playing for a win yet because I have wasted that time. And time is the most important resource. But look, my opponent, even though she's 2300 rated, so she's like top 1% of the chess players, maybe even much stronger than that, but she's playing this move, which is a huge strategic mistake. You should never ever do that, because it gives me the c5 square for free. I mean, the knight, you can never get rid of it now. You have to spend like 1, 2, 3 tempi now to exchange, but even then I can just play a4, stopping that. And otherwise, this knight is so beautiful, it controls absolutely everything. So my point is, even at this level, people have really poor positional understanding. So all you need to do is use those to your advantage. Another huge advantage of this opening is that you save so much time on your clock. The moves basically happen by itself. You don't need to work too much on it. Yes, you should be a little bit careful with your opponent's counterplay. You have to do that no matter of the opening you are playing. But as long as you understand the ideas, and my videos hopefully would help you a lot to understand them, you save so much time, which you definitely will need in the important moments of the middle game and the end game. And again, the experience is such a huge advantage that you're gonna get, because your opponent will have this opening like once out of 1,000 or something, but you're gonna play it every single time you're playing as black, as long as you play online and your opponent doesn't necessarily prepare against you. Also, if you play OTB tournament, but not like your opponent is not a super GM who is preparing multiple hours specifically against you with the engine, you will be always good to go. Even I, on my level, play this opening in my tournament games, and as long as I make sure to change it more or less so that my opponent doesn't know for sure I'm gonna play that, I'm having just incredible results with it. Okay, yeah, you see, that's like the consequences. My opponent doesn't know what to do. This knight goes to d2, but it has zero prospects to go. Again, the only idea would be to play that move rook b1, knight b3, and try to exchange that. So maybe I'm thinking even about a4 just to make sure that is never ever possible. Or just ignore all of that and say, I'm gonna play rook d4, I'm gonna double my rooks along the d file, and I'm gonna be very, very powerful. And you are not in time with all of those ideas. Let me calculate. So rook d4, she plays rook b1, I play rook a to d8, plays knight b3. Now I'm gonna take everything, and one of the pawns or the knight on b3 is going to be lost, so I'm gonna do that. Of course, she can do she can go back here to f3, and that would kind of provoke me either to repeat the position, which I don't want, because black is clearly better here. By the way, just 17 moves, I haven't done anything special. I even have done that mistake of playing knight bishop to c5 before playing a5, yet I'm still absolutely in the driver's seat, much better here. Without making any fancy moves whatsoever. That is why I love this opening so much, and I recommend you honestly just try it yourself. I understand that so many people are saying, well, I tried this opening, but my opponent is playing something weird, not what you are showing, and then I'm in trouble. Well, just try to follow the principles. Just try to always fight for the center, starting with this move d6 and then e5. Then make sure you develop every single one of your pieces. Don't spend more than one tempi on one piece without a very, very good reason. You never make a second move with the same piece. And then try to use the dark squares to your advantage. You see that all of my main pieces are on the dark squares, and I conveniently have these light squares bishop as well to control the light squares too. And the c6 pawn. The c6 pawn is like the main thing here, making sure that the whole position is very, very solid for me. And that causes an existential crisis in my opponent's head, because she has no idea what to do here. Seems like the position is fine. I mean, you have done everything correctly, you have developed all of your pieces, but it doesn't work. She doesn't have any ideas, and that is why she plays something weird like that, knight d5. It's kind of a desperata. It even has some kind of an idea behind it, because if I take it, she gets rid of this knight, which is so horrible on c3. And then she takes it with the pawn, attacking my bishop, and this rook is opening up, and also, yeah, is very active along the c file. I do think it should not work tactically, but I'm not sure yet how. First of all, I can just ignore it altogether, play king to d6, and threaten to take, because this time my knight would be protected, and I'm not sure she has anything better than just taking here, which would be fine for me. I take it back and continue my idea. But now that this knight is gone from the c3 square, this pawn is not going to be protected, so knight f3 back wouldn't be possible anymore. I'm gonna just win that e4 pawn, which means king to 6 seems to be very promising. If I take, she takes back, I can play king to... yeah, I don't want to open up the position, because if the position is going to be opened up, then she's gonna have some chances. I'm gonna just play king d6. If she's going knight b6, then this knight is very weird. I'm not sure it ever is gonna go back. I'm gonna just play rook d8 and king c7 next move. Let me play that. Because if I take and I open up this c file, that this beautiful knight, my best piece on the board, the knight on c5, wouldn't be absolutely secure. The fact that there is a c4 pawn blocking all of my opponent's pieces is actually the most horrible pawn she has. She can do anything about my knight on c5. It has an absolutely fantastic outpost. I want you to remember that c5 square for your knight in all of these Philidor / Old Indian defense openings. Because if they play the move e4 and you play d6, it's called the Philidor defense. But if they play d4 and you play d6, it's called the Old Indian defense. But essentially, you are doing exactly the same moves, and this is the beauty, the main advantage of this opening. You're so flexible, you don't care what your opponent is doing. And once I started playing this opening like 10 years ago, my chess life has changed completely, and I felt that I can really enjoy chess, because the main trouble is this whole memorization thing when you need to remember those 30 moves, horrible engine variations. It's absolutely not what you want. Like, you play chess just to enjoy it, and this opening allows you to do that. It makes chess so much simpler for you. That is why I advise you try it, you play it, and let's see what my opponent is doing here. Of course, she can go back to c3, but I'm gonna just play rook d8 and continue my idea again. Knight b6, she goes for it. Again, just rook to d8, and I have no idea how she's supposed to secure this, this knight on b6. Even here, if I just play king to c7, sacrificing my exchange, yes, you can grab it, I'm gonna take it back, but then you lose your knight. Although, yeah, you go back to d5 again. My idea was just to take, then she takes back, and just play king c7. Even if we exchange all of the rooks, this knight on b6 simply doesn't go back, and as a side bonus, the e4 pawn would be hanging. So let me just take and go back here. This knight is just horrible, and now knight d5 doesn't make any sense, because there is no rook on c1 anymore to attack my knight afterwards, after this exchange. So I think white is already in big trouble. Look at all of white pieces here. All of them are just horrible placed. This bishop on e2 is useless because of these light squares bishops, like light squares pawns. My bishop is so much more active than this guy, because I'm attacking and that guy is defending, is a very passive piece. This knight on f3 has zero prospects, like literally zero moves forwards. Here you cannot go here, no chance. Only here, but that doesn't help you. I can always play g6, and this is absolutely useless. Yes, she tries knight d2, but even that doesn't help, because you still cannot do anything at all. And I already play king to c7, just attack this guy. Maybe she can still play knight e8, a very weird move, but I can play king b8, and the only move is to go back, and then I go king a7, and thanks to the fact that c8 square is covered, I'm just winning that knight. This is very straightforward, and yes, my king goes from the center away, but of course winning the piece is worth enough reason to do that. And all of those troubles happened to my opponent in the first place because of this positional mistake. She played b5, making the c5 square available for my knight. She didn't achieve anything with that move. It doesn't create any threats. If she ever takes, I can just take it back. But that c5 square is the key one. That is why I should have played a5 in the first place, and then the knight on c4 on c5 would be beautiful and secured, and no problems with that. All right, let's see if white has any chances here in the endgame. Yeah, I can take immediately, or I can just take it back. I probably want to take immediately because I think she would have a little bit more chances if she would play knight to d5, sacrificing the piece like that, because at least you have a passer, the c4 square. But if I take now, you don't have anything at all. You still have those horrible, horrible pawns. I mean, this pawn structure where you have, whenever you have a bishop, same color bishops, you want to have your pawns on the opposite sides. And those pawns are horrible because the bishop has 0 squares to go and it's very passive and it only has to defend. Whereas your pawns are controlling the dark squares and the bishop is controlling the light squares. So this way you control absolutely all of the squares on the board, and those dark squares are huge holes for my opponent because there is no bishop for him to control it. So I can just penetrate with my second knight, and that would suddenly appear to be the best piece on the board and just destroy my opponent's position. But of course, all of that is useless, and you are going to still miserably lose if you don't know how to convert your advantage. And that is how what I want to show you here. I just place my knight. So the first step is to always optimize all of your pieces. Still, if your opponent is not that stupid, she will try to be as safe as possible. Just allow you not to allow you to penetrate and somehow be secure there. The way you win here, you basically have a few options. You can just exchange as many pieces as possible, because if you have extra material, the more pieces you exchange, the simpler it becomes to convert your advantage into a full point. Or alternatively, you optimize your pieces as much as possible until your opponent simply cannot deal with all of your threats. So you need to combine improving your position. For example, my king here was passive, and remember to always use your king in the endgame. Most of the players, 99% of the players under 2000 elo, they completely forget about the king. They think the king is like a useless piece you should put in the corner and never touch. It's not true. Yes, in the opening and in the middle game, when the queens are still on the board, you should be careful with it so you don't get into trouble. But once you come into the endgame, the king actually becomes a huge piece, an attacking piece. They say it's as strong as the rook in the endgame, and that's exactly what I'm trying to show you. At the same time, I want to stop my opponent's counterplay. It's one single most important thing that I want you to learn today. You always want, doesn't matter how great your position is, it's never ever too late to spoil your position and lose your game miserably. So whenever your opponent makes move like this move, knight to b1, try to understand what is the point. Even if it looks weird, even if he goes back and it's like it doesn't make any sense for you at the first glance, try to understand the idea behind that, which is knight c3, knight d5, and that would be a fantastic piece. Yes, I can still exchange it, but at least that would allow my opponent some activity. So I play knight a4, completely stopping that, and then she has 0 prospects to go, and now I can just play king to c5 and attack that pawn once again, and there is nothing stopping me from taking it next move. Yeah, f4, nothing bad because my base pawn is very well protected, and I just take it here. Now it's time for me. Remember, I told you that my bishop is much stronger than my opponent's, but if you have a very good reason to exchange it, because I win a pawn and I reduce the material on the board, which is great for me because I have an extra piece, then it's a good enough reason to exchange those bishops. Otherwise, I wouldn't do that. Okay, where should I go? I like both of the moves. To be honest, yeah, let's just continue my philosophy, because I say you always want to be as active as possible. Sometimes you're gonna lose because of that. It's okay, you're just learning. But in most of the cases, first of all, you're gonna learn so much, and secondly, you make it so much more difficult for your opponent when you always go forward, when you always create those threats. You combine improving your position with creating problems for your opponent. So now I'm playing knight c4, which is a check, and yeah, at least my opponent tries to create a passer here. So maybe the simpler thing is to bring my king back to control everything here, and eventually to win the endgame you need to create a passer, and that's what I'm doing here. Let me probably take first here, because the king on d4 is beautiful, controlling everything, and that pawn is not gonna get away from me. I can even play the move g6 so that white can never go forward here. She can go king to g5, but that's way too slow. Okay, and now it's time for me to grab that pawn, because once they play a4, I play knight b6, e5 doesn't help, because I can just play king to d5, and because of this move g6, because I have thought about my opponent's counterplay, there is nothing you can do with white. Now I'm taken, and then this... You always want to create passers in the endgame, and once you do that, you always want to push it forward if that's possible, if you don't lose the pawn immediately, because that way you're gonna distract your opponent from all of the important actions in the center, on the other part of the board, and then yeah, you're gonna easily win there. I hope this video was useful for you, and you're gonna give this amazing opening for black a try and crush everyone under 2000 elo. In this video I show you how to crush your opponent with the same opening if he plays the move e4.